Warning: the following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
It's the farewell season, and not only is it the farewell season, it's also the holiday season. It's Halloween, so what better way to come back, season premiere, the final season, than doing 1993's Hocus Pocus. Joining me today, the lovely, the talented, didn't come back for season 3, but is here for season 4, Mrs. Business.
Well, I mean, I would have come back for season 3, but I don't think we had any movies we needed to argue about. But this one definitely was a hot topic.
Also, you were pregnant, and I feel like arguing was just not something that you really wanted to do.
No, I would have won anyway.
So as you can hear in the background, there's a little bit of a kind of sound. That's the baby monitor. It's it's the reality that we live in, 2020. It's a husband and wife doing a podcast at 9 o'clock at night while their baby sleeps.
Yep.
That's pretty much our life. Just a quick note, because I said it up top, but in case you hadn't heard, yes, this is the final season. Season 4 is going to be the final season. I know, boo-hoo, I'm very sad, but I'm not that sad because season 4 is going to be amazing. I've already lined up some amazing guests, some that have never been on the show before, plus bringing back some of your favorites. We're going to hit big, heavy hitters. I got Lost coming up. That was one that was requested a lot. We're going to be doing Lost. And even today's, I would say, is oddly requested because this is a movie that I have gone on record before saying, I don't get it, but we're going to get into why I don't get it really soon. But let's go back a little bit before we start talking about this movie. Let's go back to the summer of 1993. Now, this is a pretty big summer for movies. I think the main one that planted its flag was Jurassic Park, that had opened a little bit earlier. I think that was either a May or a June. I think it was June. Still cleaning up at the box office. And then that fateful day in July, two children's movies that I think equally would go on to live in somewhat of infamy, Free Willy and Hocus Pocus, open up on the same day. I just still find it very strange that you would release a Halloween kids movies in July.
Well, I mean, the trivia behind that is Disney was also, I think, releasing Nightmare Before Christmas in October of that same year, so they didn't want to compete Hocus Pocus against Nightmare Before Christmas. So that was the reason that I found out they released it in July.
I think the thing that's like, okay, sure, but also like Nightmare Before Christmas, I feel like plays as either a Halloween or a Christmas movie. I feel like that's a debate that people have been having for years too, because you can watch it from, October 1st through January 1st and it not break.
It's like a November movie. Like, for me, I don't like to watch it at Halloween time because it is closer to like a Christmas movie for me. So maybe like around Thanksgiving time. But when I think about it, I think I even wait till December to watch that one. So maybe Christmas movie.
I see it 100% as a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
So the point being that this is very clearly a Halloween movie. So the fact that it's just like people have forgotten about it by the time that October had rolled around. Now, I know that's hard to think because Hocus Pocus over the last few years, it's come out of the woodwork. It's become a thing. A lot like Nightmare Before Christmas. That was another Disney holiday movie that at the time no one was really into that much. Its box office was seen as slightly disappointing. This one was actually pretty disappointing. And then everything turned around in 2012. That was the first year that Hocus Pocus made its way back onto the top 10 selling DVDs and Blu-rays of the month of October.
Is that right? I never knew that.
Yeah, it was 2012 was kind of this renaissance of Hocus Pocus. And it makes sense because, granted, you're 1 year off, but let's round up. It's about 20 years later that this movie kind of pops back up. And you think about it, well, the kids who saw Hocus Pocus and fell in love with it, they were 7, 8, 9, 10.
I was like 5, yeah.
20 years later, now we're starting to have our families. Now we're starting to, and 2012 also, remember, is kind of the beginning of this wave of nostalgia. It would be just a couple more years before they would repackage Jurassic World and Force Awakens and Terminator as these movies that you loved, and we're just kind of going to do them over again because you love things that made you happy when you were a kid. And I feel like that coincides with Hocus Pocus and Nightmare Before Christmas, although I would argue Nightmare Before Christmas started to make its comeback before.
Yeah.
That was like at least 5 years or so earlier. But Hocus Pocus, then all of a sudden it was this movie that was a box office disappointment. I won't call it a failure. It was a disappointment, but critically we can call it a failure because it has a 37% on Rotten Tomatoes, which means that about 63% of critics that saw this movie were like, no, this is not
You
good.
know what, though? We always talk about this, and I feel like if the critics don't like it, it's usually beloved by most audiences.
Yeah. This one is interesting. Well, first of all, before we even get into like picking this movie apart, I want to ask you. You said you were around 5 the first time you saw this.
5 or 6.
Do you
yeah.
remember kind of like how was it on cable? Did you see it in the theaters? Like how did
I
you
don't
see
think
this
I saw it
movie?
in the theaters. I think it was on cable, and I remember my mom turning it on because she was like, "Oh, you have to watch this. That's Halloween, and you watch Hocus Pocus for Halloween." Like that's how it was introduced to me. And I remember watching it on TV with my mom and my brother, and I thought it was like one of the best movies to watch at that time. I loved it. And, we'll probably talk about it later, but I don't think as a kid I really understood a lot of what was happening with like the adult humor,
Right.
obviously. But as I got older, and it honestly like became funnier to me. So, I mean, yeah, I've loved it ever since I can remember.
This was during a time where, I guess it, in a weird way, because, sometimes these movies that become like cult hits, I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get why. This one, even though I don't like this movie, I don't think it's a well-made movie, but I think I understand at least why people our age maybe flock to it, because I feel like it got caught up in this tidal wave of 90s Disney live action kids movies that we kind of grew up on in VHS form. Like I'm thinking this is around the time of Mighty Ducks, of Heavyweights, of Cool Runnings, Iron Will. You put all of these like live action Disney movies that of varying quality. I mean, Oscar winning Heavyweights should have won at least. And then, like I think some of these movies, when I think of Hocus Pocus, the first thing that pops into my head is like, I don't even know if this is a real memory, but it's something that if you told me, I'd be like, yeah, I believe it. Like this feels like a movie that like my 4th or 5th grade teacher probably put on during our classroom Halloween party.
Really?
Like it feels like a background noise movie.
Oh, yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah. And that's what I think. I mean, a lot of those nostalgic movies turn out to be those movies. Like, and that's why I think I have to watch this every year. Like, I know what it is, and, I know it's maybe not the most entertaining, even though it's one of my favorite movies to watch at this time. But yeah, it's habit.
So the first time I ever saw this movie, like consciously aware and choosing like, all right, I will watch this, was probably the worst circumstance to watch it. I watched it as an adult, for one. So I have no nostalgia for
You
this.
totally missed out.
And 2, it was after like the worst night of drinking maybe in my entire life, because we had gone out for Halloween. This was 2015.
Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe the most
The night
drunk-
of a million tequila shots.
Oh yeah. And I remember when we finally made it home, we put this on. You fell asleep. This was in the morning, so now this is like 6 or 7 in the morning after the worst night of drinking, maybe in my adult life. I was like, sure, why not? And I watched it, and I had a headache, and I was like, "Ugh, I hate this." But I was like, you know what? Then following year, I was like, you know what? The worst way to watch a movie, maybe watching it on your phone or on a plane would be slightly worse. But and I watched it again. I was like, no, like actually, this just doesn't click with me. So I do think this is one of those movies where it's just like, if you didn't watch it
As a kid.
right, it's the right place, the right time. And I guess let's start to get into maybe some of my things with it that I just don't get, and maybe you can tell me your point of view, because I'm not seeing it through the same lens that you're seeing it through.
No.
No. Yes, that is why we're doing the show.
Hot takes.
I think part of it is, and it's exactly what I just said a minute ago, where it's like, I would believe you if you told me this was on at a Halloween party, because I feel like this movie just has a list of like Halloween things, and it just checks off the list. It just throws them in there because it's like, sure, it's a Halloween movie. Zombie, sure, just put one in there. It doesn't matter. Like, it feels like this movie is ticking off check boxes on a list of just like weird Halloween things that have to be there, even if it doesn't quite make any sense.
Why is that a problem for you? That's what I want to know.
Because it doesn't really add anything to this story is so thin, by the way. There's almost no story. There's definitely no characters. I couldn't even tell you what the main kid's name is. It's like Alex, maybe? Mark?
Why am I forgetting it now?
Yeah,
we
like
literally
this
just
movie.
watched the movie.
We just watched this like 20 minutes.
Max.
Max. So Max is a character. He isn't a character. He is not a character. Like, can you at least concede that he really doesn't want or need anything in this entire movie?
No, he's pretty passive. Although you could argue, I guess, that he's ashamed of being a virgin and maybe attempting to lose his virginity.
Which is so
which got sidetracked,
weird.
yeah.
It is so weird that in this kid's movie, where he is 15, the fact that like people are...
Oh, he's 15 in
He's
this?
15 in this movie, and people are ragging on him so hard, like virgin jokes left and right, as if like... I'm not going to go into this crusade of like toxic masculinity and whatnot, but I will say it is very strange that in a children's movie written for children by adults, that this is the horniest movie I've ever seen. I know Danielle Radford came on and she said that Wild Wild West was the horniest movie she's ever seen. I don't know how she feels about Hocus Pocus.
And I didn't realize it until I watched it as an adult that I was like, oh, yeah, this is pretty randy.
Like... The first time that I was like, all right, I'll buy this just because it's the 90s. He's like making out with his pillow. He's like, oh yeah,
I've done that.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'll give it to you. That was even kind of like a trope in the 90s of like comedies, was like being affectionate with an object that turned out to be like something funny. Like that's in every sitcom. It's in sure, but then we get to. This is going to start to get weird because her name is Allison, so I'm referring to the character. You're just missing.
Call her Double L Allison.
Double L Allison. Well, I mean, this movie was like Double D Allison. Like, it's so weird that she's like, she uses a euphemism that I can't even remember, but she's like, my brother likes your boobs. He says your boobs are great.
Your yabos.
Yeah, she's just like, oh yeah, and I'm just like, what is happening? What 45-year-old dudes were sitting around a room? It's like, dude, let's write like some underage sex stuff. Like this can be like kids love underage sex.
I liked it.
but you just said at the time you probably didn't even realize.
No, maybe it was a subliminal thing, but I mean, yeah, I don't think I realized the severity or gravity of it with all the sexual things in it. For me, it seemed normal to me at the time. And maybe if you knew my mom, you'd understand why. But yeah, it was just like, oh yeah, like people just talk like that.
I mean, I don't know. Well, the other thing that's like really stands out, at least on like the sexuality, is like, can we all just agree that Sarah Jessica Parker's character is a sexual predator?
Oh yeah, the pedophilia is insane with her. I just love the part like, let me play with him, like these teenage boys, and I'm just like, oh, no one thought that was. I mean, and maybe we're just so our brains have shifted to this
Right.
time period where it's like, oh my God, that's like a huge no. But like back in the 90s, I was like, oh, funny pedophile.
I guess that's the other thing too. And I said this within like the first 10 minutes of us starting to watch the movie I was like, I'm very tonally confused about what this movie is supposed to be.
You know what's funny? I didn't realize that until maybe the last couple of years that I've watched it. That initial sequence, or that whole first part of the movie where they kill the little girl Emily and then they're hanged. I don't know why. Like, I must have just like not paid attention when I was younger to that first part of the movie, or I just don't remember it. But when I was watching it as an adult and really watching it, I was like, oh, this is pretty dark. I didn't realize how kind of intense that first part of the movie was, and then it completely shifts to a comedy after.
Yeah, it's one of those things too where it's just like context is everything, because like we just finished like volume 2 of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
And so it's like when you see something as stark and realistic. I mean, it really happened. Those things on Unsolved Mysteries happens. But then you watch Hocus Pocus and you watch that first scene, and of course like the poster and everything is just like, okay, here are these bumbling goofy old women, and it's like, here is an 8-year-old girl who is dead on screen, dead, head down, dead for like a couple minutes just as background dressing, and you're just like, this feels,
She looks very like Ring-like too.
Totally.
With the hair, yeah.
Her head's kind of down and she's drooped over this chair, and I was like, this is icky, and this has nothing to do with like 2020 like, you know, SJW or any of that crap. Like, this is just gross that this movie is killing a child.
It does make you feel a little bit better though when you see the child is like dead in the background, but she like obviously can't sit still, and you see her moving when she's supposed to be dead. So it's like, oh, she's okay.
Well, that's why I asked you. I was like, is she dead, or is it just like she's like unconscious or knocked out or something?
She did.
She's dead.
Yeah.
She's dead. And then her brother is turned into a cat, which is like, oh, turn me into another animal. Don't kill me. Like, I think he got off better than she did.
I mean, I guess if you want to live forever, that could be some form of torture, but I don't know. That's another argument.
It's also like, so if you're fans of Reboot It, you've heard this term recently. It's mumbo jumbo, which Ed Greer lovingly calls mumbo gumbo. But it's like, okay, wouldn't it just be enough for him? Like, because if the punishment for him is that he has to like live forever, wouldn't it just be enough that he's just like an old zombie? Like, did she have to also then turn him into a cat as well? That seems like a hat on a hat.
Yeah. Again, the trivia thing, like I always like to read trivia while I'm watching movies sometimes.
Right.
And there was a particular trivia thing that was on the list that was talking about how it seems as if, they don't explain it in the movie, but it seems as if the cat, or the Thackeray Binks, the guy who is the cat.
Thackeray.
I stop with that name.
His name is Thackeray. Thackery.
Ery.
Thackeray from Spine.
You can't even say it right. But anyway, so the trivia thing is, you know, you kind of assume in the movie that the cat is only able to talk when the candle is burning or lit, and then only able to talk to the people who lit the candle. And I think that that piece of trivia is interesting because when you think about it in the entire movie, like, yeah, he wasn't able to talk to anyone else, particularly in that first part of the scene where he turned into the cat and he was trying to rub up against his dad. That sounded weird, but as a cat. And he couldn't like talk to his dad and say, hey, the witch has turned me into a cat. So like, I think that's part of the torture in a sense too, is that you have to be this cat. You have to basically you can't tell your family, you can't tell them what happened to you, and you have to see, you know, them leave you.
Why wouldn't you put that in the movie? Like the 1 ounce of character development, and they're just like, nah, don't worry about it.
I don't know if, I guess you have to decide like who's this movie made for, and oddly enough, with all the sexual innuendo, it's made for kids.
I don't agree with that statement.
I hear you, but I think it's in a weird way intended for kids. There's like sprinkled quote unquote adult humor, which is not even like a secret. It's pretty blatant. So for kids, like I don't know if a kid could pay attention to that sort of character development.
But then why bother even having the cat in there? It's literally just exposition.
Like you said, they checked the box on all the Halloween things. Black cat.
I guess
check.
that's my problem too, is like I don't think they know who this movie's for. This movie, like, it does have some, like, there's moments that are legitimately creepy. I think when Sarah Jessica Parker is flying on her broom and she's singing this song and it's almost kind of like the Pied Piper and she's bringing the kids, it's like legitimately like creepy. The song is creepy. The way she sings it is creepy. I loved kind of like the intercutting of like the kids like kind of zombie walking. But then they immediately undercut themselves by telling you that these three are goofs and they're like incapable of really being scary. So it's just like, it's not scary enough to be horror even for kids. It's not funny enough to be a comedy. It's not even really appropriate enough to be like a family friendly movie. Like, I don't know who this movie is for.
More trivia. So I was reading that
This episode brought to you by IMDb.
Sorry, I happened to read it all, so you're sparking all these things. But one thing I read about was, I guess this movie was originally intended to be much scarier and darker than it came out to be. So I wonder if that was the intention in the beginning, and then when they changed course, it turned into something a little bit, like the tone was muffled and you couldn't really tell what it was supposed to be. So they're like, oh, let's shift to something more comedic. And I mean, I think it works, but yeah, like I think it's something just easy to watch comedy. Like, I mean, maybe that's where we differ. Like for me, I like silly, stupid comedy, and you can put on like the dumbest thing and I'll probably think it's hilarious. So yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree with you, because there were even a couple times where I laughed. Like there are some funny moments in this.
I think
movie.
Sarah Jessica Parker is hilarious in this.
I also would say that, like, I think Bette Midler, either she read the script. Actually, I'm not even convinced she read the script. I'm convinced that they're like, "Do you want to be a witch in this Disney kids movie?" And she's like, "Sure," because I feel like she kind of is in a different movie than a lot of the other.
Yeah.
And they kind of all follow her lead in a sense.
Well, I think this movie was built around Bette Midler.
It must have been, because as much as people love the I'll put a spell on you kind of musical break, like, it's odd. It's an odd part of this movie, because it, again, like, it's moments like that where it's just like, I get it. That's the iconic moment that everyone kind of remembers. It's what the marketing was built around. But at the same time, like, for the story that you're trying to tell, like, you're just taking the venom out of these villains every chance you get by making them less and less threatening and scary. When you start the movie off by killing an 8-year-old girl.
Yeah.
You know?
And the hanging was, I don't know, that always kind of disturbed me too.
But just watching the feet dangle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Like, well, for a kids movie too, it's like it's really eerie.
it is, and then it's almost like then it shifts into a different movie.
Yeah.
After that, it's.
I mean, if you even just started with like the part of the movie where it comes back to like 93 or 1993, like if you just got rid of the entire first part of the movie, it probably would be able to stand on its own, I think, because I think that's what people remember a lot about it, is all those moments. It's almost like quoting a Will Ferrell movie. It's like people remember like Anchorman, for all these like stupid quotes that they make. Like, I think the people who are nostalgic for this movie, they remember, oh, that musical scene in that, I Put a Spell on You song, and Sarah Jessica Parker go like amok, 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 like stupid things like that. I think that's what's where the emotional attachment comes.
Sure, and I think as an adult watching this, like, I have to grasp on to some form of a story here. Like, there has to be something that like strings me along, and things in the it's weird. As I was watching it, I was like, this movie has this frantic like frenetic energy, and yet we're not really going anywhere or doing anything. There's just this sense of like, go, and then you get there and you're like, okay, we're here. Like,
Well, they come up with ways to perpetuate the action too, and they're things that make zero sense to me. But I mean, I'm just along for the ride.
Sure.
I mean, maybe that's the decision you have to make. Is like you decide if you're, yes, I'm along for the ride, or no, I'm just gonna fight you the whole way. But we were just talking about like the end of the movie when Max has the potion, the leftover potion. It magically does not spill when like twisted in the air and dropped from Bette Midler, and he catches it. He easily could have just poured it on the ground and that would have been done with it, but no, he made the decision to drink it. Why? They never explain it. So that's the decision point of like, do I fight this or do I like, okay, keep it going?
what an endorsement of Hocus Pocus. Like, just let it happen to you.
Honestly, like I feel like that's what some of the best like 90s kids movies are about. It's like, well, just let it happen.
There's
Enjoy
also
it.
just like some parts that I'm like, I don't know, like, okay, so you mentioned that the backstory of kind of like the rules of fuckery,
Oh my god,
of being a cat.
Ibiza.
You mentioned that was a deleted scene, and I feel like that's something that should have been in the movie.
No, it was not a deleted scene. It was kind of just like a mention of like kind of explaining why.
But it wasn't like in the. It was all just like.
It wasn't never meant to be part of the storyline. It's like an assumed part of the story for why he can only speak to Max and Allison and
which no one.
Thora Birch.
How would anyone come to that conclusion?
People who don't have time and write trivia for IMDb.
So my point still stands though. It's like that's something that deserved maybe one or two scenes to really show, to really be like it, like this it has been terrible. Like I've been so close to the people I want to talk to and I can't talk to them. But then we go to the weirdest scene of like the Sanderson sisters are trick-or-treating and they go into Penny Marshall and Gary Marshall brother sister's house.
Yeah, so let's point this out. Penny Marshall and Gary Marshall, real brother and sister,
playing a married couple.
So imagine playing, could you do that? I think that's really weird. When I figured that out, I was like, that's strange. Like even if there's no like touching or anything, like could you really play husband to your sister on camera?
Jason Bateman and Justine Bateman do that in Arrested Development.
Which one's Justine Bateman?
His sister.
In real life, but who does she play?
I could be misremembering. Also, Dexter. They were brother and sister on the show, and then they like married in real life. So it's a little bit of a reverse.
No, that's not as weird.
Either way. The weird part is not that they're brother sister. Honestly, I don't even harp on that. It's like, okay, whatever. They didn't really touch each other, so it's not like ew, gross. Besides, my favorite movie of all time, the brother and sister like full on make out for 3 seconds, and then you find out the next movie that they're brother sister. Empire Strikes Back.
Oh, okay.
Were you really just like, what movie?
I couldn't think of it, and I was like, but I need to watch it.
Like, I don't remember Batman having a sister. Now I've lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. That's
Penny
not
and
the
Gary
weird part.
Marshall.
The weird part is it's like he invites them into his house for a party. There's no one there. It's just him. And they're there and they don't learn anything new. They don't push the plot forward. They don't really do anything. And then they leave. And it's like, why did we waste 5 minutes on this scene that did literally nothing for this movie with a cameo from two people that 90% of your alleged target audience has no idea who they are?
That's a good argument. I mean, I think it was only just again, along for the ride, some comedic humor of like, oh, they see the devil and they get distracted along the way. Their goal really is to, get children and get them to their house so they can suck the life out of them. But like, if you pay attention to the movie, it's just a bunch of little hurdles that they have to get over. Their obstacles are like, I'm in a different time and I don't really know what's happening. So that's where they use their comedy to distract them. And, so they're walking along and they say, oh, it's the devil, like, or, it's Satan. That's who we need to go towards. So that's, I think, the purpose of it is just, like I said, little things for them to go up against in order to get to their goal. Because, like, really, if they're all powerful, they should be able to get all the children without any problems. But, it's funny. I think, to me, it's funny that's like these little tiny things are what hold them back from their ultimate goal, is like these insignificant, things you find out on Halloween in 1993.
Maybe I'm asking too much, because it's like, even just like a pinch of lore, a sprinkle of lore could help. Because it's like, why is Halloween important? This could have been any other night that they came back. Why is it Halloween? Other than it just because it's a Halloween movie and it has to be Halloween. It would have been nice to have Halloween mean something, do something.
You missed the part in the classroom where they're explaining, where Allison's getting high fives for talking about Halloween. She's saying All Hallows Eve is when, people from the dead can come back.
But the Sanderson sisters, it's never part of their mission. It's never even brought up. It's never even talked about how, like, this is they've been waiting for this night. Like, there's no importance put on Halloween other than the weirdest, like, sick burn where she's like, actually, it's All Hallows Eve, and all these people high five are like, yeah, you got him. Like, it's so weird. But also, too, it's just like, okay, so they want to eat children. Like, any sort of background, any sort of, like, motivation, any sort of, like, tell me one thing about this character other than she wants to look younger. Why? Why does she want to look younger? Why does she want to be younger? Who is she trying to impress? What is she trying to recapture? Anything. One line of dialogue to just give me something to care about, like, why these people want to do what they're doing, other than, oh, because they're bad, because it's Halloween. Like, that's what this movie is just like, because they're bad and because it's Halloween. But because they're bad, because it's Halloween. Yeah, but what about because they're bad and because it's Halloween?
I mean, I don't... It's with any story you write. Like, your protagonist and your antagonist both have wants, right? It just happens to be a pretty vain want of, I want to look young.
But so then what does Max want? And how do the Sanderson
Max
sisters...
wants to have sex.
Which he doesn't. And the Sanderson sisters have nothing to do with that. So they're not the antagonist to Max.
They are holding him back from getting down with Allison, Double L.
Because
they're trying to take his sister.
But he doesn't.
He's too busy trying to save his sister, is trying to get down with Double L, and he can't because he's got to fight off these witches. He could have had a really nice, down and dirty Halloween with Allison.
But I digress.
His sister just ruined for it.
In the confines of this movie, he starts the movie and he's pantomime making out with his pillow as a substitute for Double L. Later in the movie, even though it's not a full-on makeout, he gets the cuddle with her in his bed, which is also really weird. Like, not weird that it happens because teenagers do that, but weird that, like, 45-year-old men are just, like, building up to this moment where they're, like, snuggling together in his bed. It's creepy, it's weird, but the point is, like, if that's what he wanted, he got it.
A snuggle?
He got the girl. He gets the girl halfway through the movie. And also, that has nothing to do with the Sanderson sisters, with Halloween, with any of what they want to do. It's almost like they're
But he has a clear want, and you just said he got it.
Halfway through the movie that has nothing to do with the story that they're telling.
Okay.
It's like two disparate threads, and they never quite meet in the middle. Other than the fact that, like, if you just want to flat out say, like, Max is not a character. He's not. He's just...
No, he's pretty passive. So arguably, I think you could say that maybe Thora Birch was the protagonist, or even Thackeray.
Yeah, I guess that's like, whose movie is this?
Bette Midler's.
I don't know. I think like I guess the other thing is like, I rattled off all these movies at the beginning of this kind of live action Disney with like heavyweights and Cool Runnings and Mighty Ducks, and like whether or not you like those movies or think they're well made, sure, that's up for debate. But one thing that they all had, maybe even like slightly corny, but they all had heart. They all had a lot of heart to them. It was a lot of just like, kind of like genuine emotion. Whereas Hocus Pocus has no heart to it. It has no emotion.
I completely disagree with you.
Where's the heart in this movie?
Thackeray and his sister, like the brother-sister relationship, and having like an older brother, watching out for his younger sister and being that protection. And like you miss at the end, like Thackeray when he's a cat.
I can't take you
it.
seriously when you say it.
When Thackeray,
it's like Bruno is talking to.
But at the end, like he dies on his sister's grave. Like you don't feel anything when Thackeray is like reunited with his sister at the end.
Just because they put that in there
and then he gives a kiss on Thora Birch's cheek and he's just like, ooh, chills.
Does not mean that this movie has heart. It's the most unearned moment of that movie, because it's like you have basically just been like bouncing between horror and comedy and musical. You've had no direction, and then at the end with a character who, like I've said 3 times already, you haven't even taken the time to really explain anything about him other than his sister died. Now you want me to care at the very end? Like, I don't even know this character.
Okay, here you're talking and I'm thinking, here's the through line.
Okay, go for it.
This is Max's movie. He is the protagonist. Mm-hmm. If you pay attention to the beginning, mm-hmm. he definitely does not have that close of relationship with his sister. Like, I mean, not that close, meaning like, it sounds like they bicker a lot. She gets into his room. He's like, get out, that whole thing. And the through line really is him changing at the end to really appreciate his sister. So he does have a change. He does learn something. No matter like how small it is, he goes through his whole, his peak. And his closure
just
at the end.
don't buy that, because he having one scene at the beginning where it's like mom and dad told you to get out of my room does not equal like I don't appreciate you as a sister. He takes her trick-or-treating that night.
Begrudgingly.
This is what
the following year after this movie, he's probably like, I cannot wait to take my sister out.
Wait. Knowing this movie, that's probably exactly the words they would use too. A movie that actually I love this movie, and we saw it recently, and I don't think it's a good movie, but I still love it. That had the same thing, but did it so much better, was that Kurt Russell Christmas Chronicles, where the brother and sister were like super estranged, and she was just like, we used to be best friends, and now like you're off doing all these like criminal type things. Like, can't we just be how we used to be? Like, that was an effective way of doing that, because they actually spent time on their characters. This movie almost doesn't want you to think too hard about what they're putting in front of you. That's why I said, like, it has this like frantic race to the finish line energy, and yet everything that's up on screen doesn't add up to anything at all.
It does. It might be a little shallow, but it does.
I mean, shallow is being very polite. The one thing that they do throw in that has almost no bearing on the plot, but I just kind of like it because sure, why not, is Bill the zombie.
Oh yeah, he's the best.
But it's just like, again,
he actually that used to be the scariest part for me when I was little watching this. I don't know what it was that just freaked me out about him.
Like, I cut his scenes out of the movie and it does not change a single thing.
I don't think so. I mean, he's the one who helps them at one point. Maybe a couple points. But no, he helps them escape the witches.
No, like you cut his character out and it does not change anything whatsoever. But I just like I like the one thing that they did that I was like, all right, I'll give you props for that. Where they subvert your expectations of he's like the dumb henchman, and then he, opens the stitches on his mouth and he actually like hates them just as much as the kids do. Like that's a creative touch. I wish there was more of that kind of like subversion of expectations.
Yeah. You know, as you're talking, I'm seeing the movie through your eyes, and I'm sad for you. Because I totally now can see as an adult like why you don't appreciate this movie for like those little things. And you're the one always telling me like I have no whimsy. And like it's funny because like movies like these you have zero whimsy for, and you're just like nope, reject. Like if you and yeah, I'm sad for you.
I will say this. I don't begrudge anyone that loves something for nostalgic reasons. I don't. People say it as if it's an insult, like, ugh, nostalgia. It's like, no, if you watch something and it makes you feel as good today as you felt when you were 8, or at least reminds you of how good it felt when you were 8, I have no problem with that. Where my problem is I like a lot of movies nostalgically that are probably awful. But
Name one.
I mean, I just named like 10 of them at the beginning of this movie. Like I'm sure Heavyweights is not actually a well-crafted, well-made movie. It suffers from fourth act.
But everyone loves it.
Because we remember like how great it was as kids.
Yeah.
Even Mighty Ducks. I rewatched Mighty Ducks. I rewatched that whole trilogy like once a year, and I know those aren't good movies.
The first one is.
The first one's okay.
You're the person who likes sequels, and I don't understand that.
Different topic.
Okay.
But my point being is, I don't begrudge anyone that loves something purely for nostalgia. But what I don't like is when people love something purely for nostalgia and put it on this pedestal as if it's like, no, this is a great movie. I'm like, it's not. You can love it for what it is, but please don't act like this is up there with like The Godfather or Jaws. It's Hocus Pocus. I don't think that this deserves the yearly fanfare that it gets. That's the point. That's the part where I struggle, where I'm just like, what if every January people are like, oh, Cool Runnings, we have to watch Cool Runnings this month? Like, that would be weird. That's how I feel about Hocus Pocus at Halloween. I'm like, this is so weird that this is the movie that everyone has chosen to rally around.
I wonder if it's more for like performance. Not that everyone's performance was like immaculate in this, but it was the way that the witches are the most memorable in this, right?
Of course.
So it's really the way that Bette Midler, Sarah Jessica Parker, and I forget her name is Kathy
something.
Najimy, I think.
Yeah.
Like even like Kathy Najimy, like, you know, she played that role so well. Like all three of them did. And I think because those roles are so iconic, it really carries the movie.
I mean, I don't disagree with you there. In fact, they announced that they're doing a sequel. It might be just
Hocus Pocus 2?
Yeah. Yeah, they are. I think they released like a still the other day of
Oh
the
my
three
God,
of
I'm
them
so
back in costume.
excited.
I'm calling it now. I bet you it's going to be in the vein of a lot of these sequels where the witches will be 90% of the movie, as opposed to being kind of like they share this movie with the kids and it's kind of like the kids versus the witches.
Yeah.
It'll be mostly the witches in the sequel because that's all anyone cares about.
No, exactly. But that's why everyone loves this movie so much, is because like we did love the witches and we loved how they were portrayed.
I also think it's like, and again, like,
and I had a kind of a crush on Omri Katz, a guy who played Max, but you know,
but he was,
I was a little kid.
Yeah.
Not now.
This is like just a hindsight observation because obviously I don't hold it to it, but it's just like, how could you go from Jurassic Park, maybe the best performance by children in any movie ever? Like I can't think of another movie off the top of my head where like those kids are great. And then you come to like this like a month later or 2 months later at the movies and you're just like, man, these kids are awful. Except Thora Birch. Thora Birch is great.
She was really
but
good.
The other two, I'm just like, this feels like a made for TV movie. This doesn't even feel like a real movie.
Yeah, I'll give you that, but to your point, maybe that's why it did so well. Like I think it gets rebroadcast every year, and it's like, yeah, it's a made for TV movie. It's easy to watch, something that kids like can watch pretty easily and adults won't hate. So like that's why it works.
Yeah,
I'm right.
No, it's
I'm right.
it's not a right or wrong. It's not what this show's about. But it is like pretty undisputable that, you know, the last few years it's like Hocus Pocus has become like watching Rudolph at Christmas. Like it's just something that like
Okay, that's a whole other thing of like I mean, it's another argument, I guess, maybe for both of us, but like when you watch Rudolph as an adult, like it's a pretty, you know, rough movie. You know, it's in different ways, but
Rudolph is just incredibly mean-spirited.
Yes, mean-spirited should not be a Christmas movie. And I mean, the only cool thing about it is like it's kind of amazing what they did with stop animation. But the story itself, like, it kind of sucks. So if anything, with that argument, that makes Hocus Pocus the perfect Halloween holiday movie.
But I disagree on a couple levels, and I don't want to turn this into the defense for Rudolph episode.
that'll be the season mid-season finale.
Yeah. But I just think, like, you know, there's a reason why that's a staple. It's like those songs in Rudolph also transcended that movie. Like, you can go into a department store, well, can't this year, but any other year, and you would hear like Silver and Gold or some of those like Holly Jolly Christmas. Like, you could hear those songs playing over the PA by other artists. Like those became Christmas carols. They became Christmas songs.
I put a spell on you
is already a cover of another song, and Bette Midler's version is fine, but it also comes at the weirdest part of the movie. Again, like I said, like it just sticks out so much from what they're trying to accomplish before at the very beginning and even later in the movie. Like it just feels like we paused what we were doing to let Bette Midler be Bette Midler for a minute, and then we'll get back to the movie. Which, but if I'm an 8-year-old kid, I don't know who Bette Midler is. I don't care who Bette Midler is. Why is there this big old song break in the middle of this movie?
It's a distraction. Like, I mean, I'm speaking.
You're distracting me from.
I'm speaking as a parent now, but it's like, wow. I mean, if I can distract Penny with a song, you know, when she gets older for whatever reason I need, then yeah, that's a perfect time. It's like, okay, we're about halfway through the movie. We don't want the kids to get bored. Put a song in there. Let them dance. Give the adults a break.
Hocus Pocus, man. It is crazy. It doesn't feel like a Disney movie when you watch it. Like, it's almost surprising that it is a Disney movie.
Really?
It doesn't have that Disney feel to me.
It does for like a live action Disney 90s movie, in my opinion. Like, it's of its time Disney to me. It's
just missing a lot. It's missing a lot for me. And you know what the thing is? I'm going to walk back something I said earlier where I said it's like, well, I didn't have the nostalgia for this. I did not have the nostalgia for Free Willy. I never saw Free Willy until we watched it, 2 months ago?
That was your first time watching it?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And Free Willy's great. I love Free Willy. That movie's dumb too, but at least that movie has a ton of heart and it tries. This movie, I feel like, just gave up. I feel like this movie gives up about 45 minutes, and it's just like, all right, let's just ride this out.
Do you at least think it's like enough of a spectacle?
No, as a matter of fact, this movie feels oddly claustrophobic. Like there's like maybe 2 or 3 like sets in this whole thing, and even like the end battle, which by the way I don't hate, just because it's kind of like how 90s movies were, but it's like it's very clearly a soundstage. Like I'm almost positive at one point I saw like the breaking of the matte painting and a little bit of the ceiling.
I have a trivia thing for you about that.
Of course you do.
So that was a soundstage.
Yeah.
And they actually brought live, like uprooted, like live trees into the soundstage. I forgot from where, but like there was like specific trees that they wanted for that scene, so that they put that onto the soundstage.
It's just weird because it's like it feels so small that it's like at that point with that much effort, like just go outside. Like it'll automatically feel and look bigger.
But you can't. I mean, it'd be hard to go outside because they, Bette Midler and all the witches needed to be suspended on their brooms.
You can still do rigs.
It's probably more expensive than doing it on a soundstage.
Well, if you're going to do it on a soundstage, then at least try to frame it properly so that I can't tell where the ceiling starts. Like that's the thing, and this is directed by Kenny Ortega, who, by the way, is the guy who did This Is It, mostly known for kind of his like stage performances. A choreographer, he did the choreography for Dirty Dancing. I believe he also did the choreography for Bette Midler's tour, which is probably how he got this job, which is his first movie. This is his first movie.
Yeah.
But that when we were watching the finale, I was like, this feels like I'm watching a like Hamilton, like I'm watching the taped version of a play.
I mean, that would kind of make sense with Kenny Ortega, and like if anything, I'm surprised that there aren't more musical numbers then. Because, I mean, maybe that's why it's like, we need to let Bette sing, just let her sing one song so we can get that in. And that was probably like the center highlight for Kenny Ortega too, I would imagine.
That's what I said. I thought that Sarah Jessica Parker one, like if you had that tone and done more songs like that, like I feel like that could have been such a benefit to this movie, because that was the first time, maybe actually no, I take it back. That was the only time in that movie that I thought Sarah Jessica Parker was actually creepy and menacing, was when she sang that song and you're watching these kids kind of walk to their doom. Which, by the way, nothing ever comes of that. They just kind of stand outside and that's it.
Reminds me of like Ivan Ooze in that Power Rangers movie.
But the difference is you had someone with a fire hose trying to stop all those parents from jumping into the canyon or whatever it was. Like there was some sort of action around it. This movie is just like, this happened and then that happened and then this happened and then it's over.
Yeah.
I'm
look, okay with that.
I promise you, as much as it maybe sounds like in this episode, like I'm not here to try to change your mind. Your mind is made up.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand, because this is one of those movies where I'm just like, I don't get why people like hold this in such high esteem. And it is interesting. I do find that stat interesting. I wish I could remember so I could cite it, where 2012 was kind of like the beginning of this resurgence, because now it feels like, oh, like there's never been a year where we haven't, for me, had to watch Hocus Pocus on Halloween,
And I think the big question is, with Hocus Pocus 2 coming out, is it going to be like a completely different movie? And is it going to try to be a comedy or actually something creepier, maybe like it was supposed to? Or, I mean, also, like, are people going to just reject it and just say, like, it doesn't remind me of, like, the nostalgia?
I think that's kind of how these things tend to run these days. I mean, like, when you think of some of the most, like, anticipated, like, we're bringing it back, we're doing it again, like...
Dumb and Dumber 2 comes to mind.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10, it's, like, the hype is real and people, like, can't wait, and then they see it and they hate it because it's not the movie that they saw.
I think a lot of that has to do with, and this is just my personal opinion, when I watch those movies, like, again, Dumb and Dumber is the one that comes to mind because that one was such a highly anticipated one for me, because I just loved Dumb and Dumber. Like, that was my favorite comedy growing up. And there was something about the iconic roles, Jim Carrey and, oh my God,
Jeff Daniels.
Thank you, Jeff Daniels, doing, Harry and Lloyd. And you just remember that character so much, and they played it, but like they didn't play it quite the same way. And I wonder if with Hocus Pocus, if the three women are not able to play it quite the same way, if it will, be as well received.
I mean, we're 25 plus years now removed from Hocus Pocus. So, the reason why they didn't play it the same in Dumb and Dumber, and why a lot of these characters feel different, is because the actors are different. Like, people have changed and evolved, and I don't think you can play that same way that you did almost 30 years ago.
Yeah, and that's valid. But that's what I think makes or breaks a sequel or, reboot like that.
That being said, these characters are so wafer thin, and this original movie's inability to pick a lane and stick with it, I almost feel like that's a benefit to Hocus Pocus 2. It's like, well, you can make it a little scarier. You could go that way. Or you can, what I personally think they're going to do, I think they're going to lean more into like the silly and the absurd and the crazy part of it.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, I think just everyone's learned, for the better. Just like, we can make this movie better overall. So I think it could be like a completely different type of movie and maybe not even that reminiscent of the original Hocus Pocus.
Well, there's only upwards to go in my book.
Yeah, probably.
Who knows? Look, at the same time, a lot of this is the same problems that I had with Nightmare Before Christmas. I just think these like Disney Halloween things they're just not my jam. They're just not for me. I don't think they've quite nailed the Disney Halloween yet.
No, I also, just from experience with you, I don't know if you really like a lot of Halloween movies in general, besides Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, I tend to only really like I loved the Halloween reboot that we saw a couple years ago with like older Jamie Lee Curtis.
That one was pretty good.
But see, that's one where it was like I was expecting that to not be good because when you revisit a role, 30 years later, it's going to be terrible. And they found a way to do it. So in my book, maybe there's still hope for Hocus Pocus. Even though people like the first Halloween is a pretty great movie too. But yeah, I'll give you that. But again, I liked Hubie Halloween. That was fun.
Oh my God, that one was hilarious.
It's just,
again, stupid humor and like
so
things just kind of
dumb.
happening.
But do you know why I accept that kind of like, that movie is a bad movie, but it is so dumb. But it chose a lane. It chose to be dumb and silly instead of spooky and scary. And I feel like if Hocus Pocus just chooses one lane and really commits to it, I can get on board with it.
And they probably will.
Let's hope so. Well, that was our episode on Hocus Pocus. What a season premiere. Hopefully you guys are with me for the long run on this season. I don't know how long season 4 is going to go. It's the last one. It'll end when it's going to end. But I promise you, you're going to want to stay put because a lot of the ones that I've talked about over the years that I want to do, I'm finally making them happen. They are going to happen. In the meantime, go check out Reboot It on YouTube. Season 3 is going strong. We just did Cars last week. It's Halloween. We're going to be doing the Universal Monsters this week and a lot of other cool ones. We're going to finish up our DCEU. All that fun stuff's happening on the Reboot It channel. And you can stay right here for more Hot Takes with Billy Biz coming up this season. Well, thank you to my guest who also just lives in the house, so you couldn't run.
Happy to join you again. Thank you for having me.
And this is maybe the only time that we're just going to have to call this because we have to feed our baby and put her back to bed.
Oh, goodness.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you guys next week.